Hello everyone, welcome back to my reading of Fate, Strange Fake, Volume 4. Today we'll probably be reading 2 chapters, the interlude called The Boy Does Not Believe in God, and then the actual next chapter. So I also want to apologize, I referred to the character of Haruri as Haruhi the whole time. Kinda wish it was Haruhi, because Haruri is not easy to say, but it is what it is. We live and we learn, so we'll have to make sure that we watch for that. I've also made the text slightly bigger, mostly for me. Anyways, alright, let's continue here. Interlude. The Boy Does Not Believe in God. The Wetland Mansion. Go back about half a day. Look, boy, your first trial's already arrived. The words of the captain, who called himself a shadow of a Watcher-class heroic spirit, caused Sigma to spin around. His gaze came to rest on a lone girl. She was his enemy, an assassin's servant summoned by another master. But the girl sprang into action before Sigma had a chance to realize that. She closed the distance between them in an instant and asked, in a voice stripped of emotion, "Are you a mage who seeks the Holy Grail?" Sigma returned the stare of the girl assassin and, for a moment, accepted his own death. The presence of death hung thickly about the girl in front of him. It was almost as if her magical energy itself was adapted for taking human lives. Ah, Sigma immediately understood. So this is a proper servant. Every muscle in Sigma's body screamed at him to run. The instincts carved into his immature magic circuits and brain answered that running would do him no good. If he gave even one wrong answer, he would lose his life. He had not been able to figure out anything about his own servant, Watcher, after a full day of conversation, but this girl, Sigma coldly thought, was genuinely simple and straightforward. If he fought, he would die. Simple answer. The instincts and experience he had gained struggling through many battles recognized the strength of the girl in front of him. That being the case, he had no choice but to abandon himself to fate. Sigma simply and easily accepted death. Accepting death, however, did not mean he would give up on life. His probability of dying in this situation was just higher than when he was walking around normally. Sigma calmly went on trying to think of a way to survive. The fact that moments earlier the self-proclaimed shadow who called himself captain had told him to keep struggling against God and never accept fate might also have had something to do with this. In any case, although the boy had accepted that he was on the edge of a cliff, infinitely close to certain death, he never stopped racking his brains for a way out. Then, when the girl assassin was tired of waiting and about to repeat her question, he finally gave his answer. That's probably half right. Half. As a mage, I'm half-cocked. Some even look down on me as someone who only uses magecraft. As for whether I seek the Holy Grail, I'm of two minds about whether I should. Assassin fell silent. It was Sigma's turn to ask a question. Now, I'd like you to answer my question. What do you plan to decide? What do you plan to decide based on my answer? Whether or not you are an enemy. I don't want hostilities. Would it be possible for me to negotiate with your master? I have no master. Murderous magical energy overflowed from the girl assassin's body. Sigma was thinking that he seemed to have asked something he should not have when the captain cut in. What did I tell you, boy? If you were applying Watcher's power, you wouldn't have put your foot in your mouth like that. That girl assassin's all right, but she was summoned by a bloodsucker. She killed her master once, but it didn't take, so she cut her ties. Why not try a lie? I'm a hitman who specializes in vampires. I'm the one conducting negotiations, Sigma told the captain, wondering why he was butting in so loudly. Be quiet. His words, however, brought a suspicious look to Assassin's face. Who are you talking to? A servant. You spoke of my master as well. As I thought, you are a participant in the Grail War. Assassin leapt back several meters in an instant and fixed a piercing animosity on Sigma. Sigma was readying himself, seeing that negotiation was impossible, when he heard the voice of the boy with the mechanical wings from behind him. Oh, sorry. It seems like no one told you. The only one who can see us or hear our voices is you, Watcher's Master. We're just shadows popping directly into your brain due to Watcher's influence. I wish you could have told me that first, Sigma mentally grumbled. All the while, however, he kept a cool head. He endeavored to observe Assassin's movements, even as his brain processed multiple simultaneous trains of thoughts. What would Assassin do? Would he have a chance to avoid it? Could he use that nearby table and chairs for cover? Unfortunately, her whole body was swathed in black robe, and he could not predict her actions based on the movements of her muscles and joints. Oh, I never even considered that as a positive to using that. Sigma was in the process of tracing an escape route in his head when Assassin's lips moved. Zabania. At that point, the captain's voice sounded. Here comes her hair. Look lively now. Just as Sigma grasped the meaning of those words, hair really did extend from the shadows of Assassin's hood, attempting to coil around his windpipe. Sigma avoided it by a hair's breadth. Oh, come on. Come on, guys. Come on. Really? A hair? Okay, come on. And Assassin's eyes narrowed. Apparently, she had not expected him to dodge. As a matter of fact, without the captain's warning, he would not have been able to in time, and the hair would have closed around his throat. Seeing the hair carve away part of the column he dodged toward, Sigma felt certain that he just slipped through certain death. At the same time, another shadow, the boy with a snake staff, called out to him. She has more than 10 noble phantasms, and she's capable of deploying more than one at a time, but she freezes for just a moment when she uses a new one. I think aiming for that opportunity, or that opening, might be your best chance. Does she even need to use a noble phantasm to kill someone of my level? Sigma wondered as he dodged the countless lunging strands of hair. Not for you, his answer came in the captain's voice. He's wary of a servant attack. Of course, we shadows have no way of launching one. Multiple simultaneous deployment, Sigma thought, listening to the captain's stifled laughter. That means that she invoked a perpetually active noble phantasm like that hair in order to protect herself from being targeted when she fires a single-shot technique. If she has a perpetual offensive noble phantasm, what about a defensive one? She has one, a noble phantasm that protects her by turning her skin into special crystal. Okay. As soon as he heard the boy with the snake staff voice from behind him, Sigma stared behind Assassin and shouted, Now! Stab her, Chaplain! Chaplain? Assassin spun around, raising her guard at what sounded like an order to attack. Sabania! The word stab suggested a physical attack. She invoked her noble phantasm ready to deal with any blade, but there was no one there and she could sense no disturbance of magical energy. Did he just say a random name? When she realized it was a trap and turned back to face Sigma, she found a black tube with holes punched in it in several places right in front of her eyes. Just as she moved to clear it away with her blades of hair, the cylinder split, and a light more dazzling than the midsummer sun spilled out. Sigma leapt outside as he hurled the M8 stun grenade at Assassin, noisily smashing through the window in the process. The bang and the flash began immediately after, but by that time he had already started to fall. The room that Sigma and Assassin had been in was on the second floor, but Sigma skillfully righted himself in midair and landed lightly as a cat. I can't hope to damage a heroic spirit's eyes or eardrums with a physical stun grenade, but it should distract her for a moment. I've erased my presence. I should temporarily hide myself and... Sigma got to his feet, hoping that his opponent wasn't equipped with magecraft abilities or abilities for detecting his presence. An unbelievable sight met his eyes. He saw a woman, falling down, pressing her hands over her ears, staring at the room where the flashbang had gone off. Going by her clothes, she was a civilian, but her presence outside the wetland mansion at this hour was unnatural. Could she be Assassin's master? The vampire? Wrong, the captain's voice sounded from behind him. She's not Assassin's master. She's a poor, poor little girl who got dragged into the Grail War. The shadows had not lied to him. At least, so far, they had no reason to. Based on their information from the Watcher supposedly observing everything from above, Sigma provisionally identified the girl a few meters ahead of him as a civilian. And the action Sigma took toward that civilian who got dragged into war was, Run! You'll get caught up in a battle if you stay here. He shouted in an emotionless wave, and that was all. Regret seized him as soon as the words were out of his mouth. What am I doing? That shout just gave Assassin my position. If he lived according to the training he received in youth, the correct response would have been to immediately eliminate the witness or use her as a decoy in order to conceal himself. Watchers are beginning to influence me then. Hey, don't go around blaming the people on me, bro. Sigma could hear a shadow's carefree voice from behind him. He ignored it and started running towards the girl. A robber is holed up in the house. I'll act as a decoy, so you need to hurry and... Before Sigma could finish speaking, a black figure stood between him and the girl. Just as Assassin was about to thrust a knife at Sigma, a leather jacket-clad arm appeared from beside her and held her back. Assassin glared silently at the owner. The man with red-streaked blonde hair, who wore the jacket, beamed back. That strike didn't look like it was aimed at a vital spot. You don't intend to kill him? This mage had no intent to kill me. I cannot yet determine if I ought to kill him. As long as he is a master in the Holy Grail War, however, it is necessary to at least halt his movements, Assassin replied. The man in the leather jacket looked at Sigma. I don't know about that. He showed no hostility when he saw Ayaka either. It would be normal to assume that she's Assassin's master. Assassin fell silent. The blonde man ignored her and posed to Sigma a question as he helped the girl called Ayaka to her feet. I'm a servant manifested in the Saber class. Pleasure to meet you. After casually revealing his personal information, the man continued with a fearless grin. For now, would you mind hearing us out? If you desire a fight, well, it is the Holy Grail War, so I'd be willing to accept, but... Sigma eyed the man warily, unsure of his intentions. One of the shadows, however, laid a hand on Sigma's shoulder. Let it go. The old shadow in an outfit that reminded Sigma of a Japanese temple advised him. We're learning more of these figures of shadows, but I don't know who they are. The man in front of you is probably fast enough to dodge rounds from that assault rifle or whatever you call it. As you are, you have no hope of victory. You wish to struggle through certain death, however. You wish to challenge him as a trial. I will not stop you. Shadow's way of speaking, as if Sigma would stand a chance eventually, puzzled him. In the end, however, he let out a big sigh and greeted the man who called himself Saber. There are guest rooms. I'll show you the way. Sigma did not understand what was going on as he headed for the guest rooms. The captain walked beside him with a quizzical look on his face. Still, boy, I'm sure you wanted to shout out a plausible name for a heroic spirit, but why an actor of all people? And one from an era more recent than mine. I was going to say, like, the only Charlie I know is Charlie Chaplin, or Chaplin I know is Charlie Chaplin. He must have meant the name Sigma had shouted earlier to fool Assassin. Based on the lack of reaction from the trio walking behind him, Sigma confirmed that the voice of the shadows really were only audible to him. He considered for a moment before answering the captain in a low voice. It was just the first great man that came to mind. Okay. I see. So you like classic comedies, do you? I'd have never guessed. Captain stifled a chuckle. Presumably the world had bestowed knowledge of Charlie Chaplin on him through Watcher. As he vanished, the boy with the snake staff looked on at Sigma with affectionate pity. In that case, let's work to ensure you end this war with a smile. Sigma mumbled something at that, then wordlessly picked up his pace. He watched comedy films over and over. Okay, I'm sorry, just the idea of Sigma from this, just like watching like an Adam Sandler movie and considering that like watching like Happy Gilmore over and over, it's kind of sending me. It's kind of like I'm having a hard time like parsing that. What an interesting thing to have a character who's like, I watch comedy movies over and over. Oh my god, right, this takes place in America. There's a non-zero chance of that. Oh, this is crazy to think about. Anyways, he watched comedy films over and over. If pressed, he would have to admit that he liked them. He admired them. Still, if asked whether he had laughed at them with all his heart, Sigma could not say that he had. He could not imagine himself with a heartfelt smile, the kind of smile that Saber flashed him earlier. That had been his smile that seemed to take pleasure in the whole world. How could a heroic spirit, who continued to fight even after death, wear such a smile? Sigma could wonder, but could he come up with an answer? He could not come up with an answer. So he silently stifled his heart, all the while thinking that jealousy and longing for people who could smile were useless to him now. did he even have a right to smile in the first place? With such doubts in his mind, he was about to set foot into another trial, all the while feeling faintly irritated by the fact that, despite his contract with Watcher, which claimed to see everything, he could not see through his own heart. Again, Sigma thought, he did not believe in anything. Not gods, not Buddhas, not even demons. He thought that maybe if he devoted himself to one of them, he might be able to smile. Only to realize that, as soon as he did not believe in himself, he had nothing to offer. Try as he might, Sigma could not find anything in himself that was worth offering. Damn, dude, you gotta watch more Adam Sandler movies. Well, now is that a typo? Or is that a word I've never heard before? Retrun? I think that's meant to be return. I'm like 99% certain that's supposed to be return. In fact, okay, this is page 62. Let's go back to the table of contents. It is absolutely meant to be return. Okay. So that is just a very funny typo. The gods return from Twilight. It's been pretty good with no typos so far, so that's I mean, it's a chapter title, but oh, it's right here. The gods return from Twilight. Let's learn what's up with this, because I'm real curious about some of this. I'm actually going to make it slightly bigger again. I got space. That's not what I wanted. 1, 4, 5. There we go. Good. No, wait. 5. Good. Okay. The gods return from Twilight. Underneath the meat processing plant. Okay, we're back here. Okay, so... I won't mind if you kill me. How many humans do you believe would agree to that? Basilot asked the homunculus intruder without changing his expression. She, on the other hand, appeared genuinely confused. What? I don't see why I should treat them as humans if they won't do what I tell them. It did not sound like a joke or sarcasm. At that point, it had become clear that they would not reach an understanding. Basilot, however, remained expressionless and decided to continue the conversation in order to learn about his opponent. Alcides, still materialized, waited behind him. It was unusual for a master to take the lead, but both Alcides and Basilot judged that, as Alcides' primary weapon was a bow, it was better for him to hang back and survey the field. Is that how an Einspurn homunculus thinks? It was possible that an advanced homunculus might consider itself to be above humans. Francesca had told him many things about the Einspurns. Still, something about the homunculus's ideological leanings seemed off. To begin with, the aura cloaking her body was not that of any homunculus Basilot knew. The Einspurns? Oh, you mean the people who made this vessel? They're not as good as us, but, well, I suppose they did their best. Vessel? Yes. Without it, I would have had to possess some other human by force, but then our souls would have mixed and caused slight shifts in my memories and... Oh, okay, well, here we go, divine, yep, okay. That's what I thought. I have an idea who this is because it's a servant that I knew was in Strange Fake, but I haven't seen yet. So I think I know who this is, but we'll see. But then our souls would have mixed and caused slight shifts in my memories and personality. I don't have to worry about that with this body. It's almost like it was born to be a divine vessel. A divine vessel. The instant those words left the woman's mouth, Basilot felt a chill in the air behind him. A divine vessel? Alcides asked the woman, drawing his bow. That's right. You claim to be a god, then? A goddess, actually, but... Hey! The Einspurn's homunculus's eyes widened as she spoke. A thunderous roar passed by Basilot. A gale sprung up in the room. A death-clad arrow flew at the self-proclaimed goddess, drawing in the magical energy of the workshop. The woman appeared flustered, but quickly released magical energy from her hand to envelop the arrow, which then began to make loops around her as if guided by invisible rails of air. Then, without losing velocity, the arrow Alcides had fired flew back at Basilot. Basilot tilted his head slightly to the right and dodged the arrow by a hair's breadth. The shockwave assaulted his skin, eardrums, and eyeballs, but the mystically reinforced surface of his body repelled it with brute force. Behind him, Alcides grabbed the arrow with one hand. A moment later, a tremor ran through the air of the workshop. Having viewed the sequence of events, Basilot narrowed his eyes. No special magecraft. She parried Alkides' shot with pure magical energy control. At that point, neither Basilot nor Alkides believed the woman in front of them to be a homunculus mage. Basilot did not know who or what she really was. He could not judge the truth of her claim to be a goddess, but it was at least reasonable to consider her something with power to rival a servant. Behind him, Alkides seemed to have reached the same conclusion. A ripple of searing hate reached Basilot through the path of magical energy between them, prompting him to consider what he could do to restrain Alkides. The self-proclaimed goddess and the Avenger ignored Basilot as they exchanged words. "That wasn't very polite. You must be as arrogant as an Eastern emperor shooting at a goddess like that." "Which of us lacks manner? Woman who names herself a goddess in my presence. I demand to know why you have so rudely intruded on our base of operations." "Oh, isn't this a Holy Grail war? I'm neither master nor servant, but I'm free to ally myself with any faction I choose." At that point, a dangerous glint entered the homunculus's eye, and her hand produced countless arrow-shaped bolts of light. Okay. "It's only natural for me to help eliminate the detestable opposing forces, wouldn't you agree?" She spit out the words lightly, but there was no emotion in her voice. Something in the woman's attitude almost suggested a mechanical doll attempting to simulate humanity. In the same instant, the innumerable arrow-shaped bundles of magical energy launched themselves at Alkides, only to vanish right in front of Basilot and reappear from a wall in a different place, flying straight at the homunculus woman. The woman made one downward flap of her hand without uttering a word. All the arrows turned downward, dispersing magical energy, and vanished before reaching the floor. Spatial labyrinthization. The mage who... Oh, this is okay. Yeah, this is the other girl there. This is Haruri. The mage who up to that point hidden herself in the shadows of the entrance behind the woman who called herself a goddess spoke. The goddess heard of her apparent companion and addressed Basilot with a fearless grin. "Finally decided to activate your wards? You're certainly easygoing, making a maze when I'm already right in front of you." "Hardly," Basilot responded dispassionately to the goddess's contemptuous tone. "This is its proper application." Basilot remained expressionless as he spread his arms and emitted magical energy from both of his hands. The roof of the underground workshop writhed open to reveal a bluish spring sky. The entire meat processing plant was twisting into an entirely different form. What? A moment later, vicious demonic beasts appeared from the ceiling, which had twisted open in a spiral pattern and entered freefall. What the frick? It was as if the entire plant had become a giant carnivorous beast that was trying to devour the people inside it. Haruri, who had been, gotta make sure I say it right, who had been cowering behind Philia, could not suppress an exclamation at the sight. "Impossible. Such a large-scale defense mechanism." "He's partially transformed it into another world." What the frick? That's crazy. If he can create a defense mechanism on this scale, why didn't he start by... That was as far as Haruri's... I almost said it. That was as far as Haruri's thoughts got before Philia spoke. I see. She matter-of-factly considered the peculiarities of her enemy's workshop while observing the falling demonic beast with annoyance. "This workshop isn't for keeping intruders out. It was designed from the ground up to stop anyone who enters from leaving. It gives you a glimpse into the twisted personality of its maker." Philia grinned broadly, raised her hand in the direction of the plummeting beasts, and ostentatiously loosed an arrow of magical energy. Alright, we're now at the Colesman Special Correction Center. This is with the Faldius here, right? The workshop is in the industrial district is active. After receiving a subordinate's report, Faldius strode to the center of the monitor room. His servant assassin was currently en route to the Scradio family's headquarters on the west coast in order to assassinate Galvaroso Scradio. That left Faldius unprotected. As a result, he was determined to be thorough with his workshop's defenses and with information gathering intelligence. He had hoped there would be no major developments, but it appeared that the world had not heard his prayers. Things had been hectic since the early morning. To begin with, the servant, apparently assassin, who had assaulted the police station had returned to the mansion, which was now Sigma's base of operation. Okay, right. Because my brain went assassin, and I'm like, huh? But then I remember, no, it's Berserker who's who's the one I was thinking of. So no, it's the woman. Saber and a woman who appeared to be his master had also been there, and now were reportedly sleeping in a guest room. Incomprehensible. Faldius had asked Sigma if it was possible to dispose of them, but the response had come that it would be difficult, as Assassin was wary of Sigma. Accordingly, Faldius instructed Sigma to propose an alliance in order to acquire information, as well as to challenge the King of Heroes and Lancer, his trusted friend who was conjectured to possess equal power. The exchange, however, had ultimately served only to confuse Faldius. He'd asked if Sigma had managed to identify the servant he had summoned. The answer he had received after a few seconds of silence had defied reason. Hold up, this is really funny. Chaplain. Lancer Charlie Chaplain. That's the heroic spirit I summoned. Oh my god, this is really funny. Sorry, could you repeat that? Lancer Charlie Chaplain. I will ascertain this is really funny. This screenshot is so funny. Hold up, this is amazing. I will ascertain his noble phantasm and skills before long. I've determined that using a command seal to force him to talk is not a good strategy. Excuse me. At that point, communication had caught off, leaving Faldius to cradle his head for a while. Chaplain, what on earth is that possible? The king of comedy, a lancer. Why? Is he lying? No. Even if he is, Chaplain still wouldn't make sense. What the hell's going on in this Grail War? He'd still been wondering. That's insane. Like, I can't even... If you told me that this... Like, I know it's not real, but just reading this phrase is killing me, especially our talk of, like, I wonder if there's any servants that are still, like, alive, even though he's not, but he's damn close. He had still been wondering when he had been brought the report that the Scradio family's composite mystic workshop had activated. This is why I oppose letting Francesca choose personnel. Faldius had initially considered making under the table deals with various clock tower factions and temporarily headhunting mages from them. Let's see how many of these we know. There are many candidates. Augustus Hendrik Asplund from Value. Nope. Krast Lenny Wegner from Kishua. Nope. Valenia Sisilfali from Mistile. That name actually looks familiar. Mizia Claurum from Chimera. That sounds like a character from Cardcaptor Sakura. Mages, who were nonetheless on a level that they could completely control. Faldi's original scheme had been to manipulate such people from behind the scenes. Because the overall plan called for making an enemy of the clock tower, however, a variety of strays that had ended up participating as masters through Francesca's mediation. Even Sigma, with some ties to Faldius, ended up causing chaos, as their earlier conversation proved. By the time he had a report that Haruri was being led toward Bazlot's workshop by an Einsburn homunculus, it was enough to make him regret sending Assassin away. Instantaneous movement may be possible with the use of the command spell, but all the way from the west coast? In a real Grail War, it would be one thing, but in this fake Grail War, forced into being through absurdity piled on absurdity, not even Faldius, on the side of the masterminds, could predict what irregularities might occur. Damn Haruhi Borzak. Haruri! Gotta get it right. So when it seemed like she's gonna offer Bazlot an alliance, she turns around and starts a battle out of nowhere. This is the Einsburn homunculus doing. Faldius' head ached. He was about to heave a sigh when his subordinate, the female mage Alundra, called out to him. The workshop appears to be at maximum deployment. It seems that a ward was simultaneously erected around the entire district to keep people away, but I've set additional repelling wards around the perimeter just to be safe. We also received a communication from the police station saying that members of Clan Calatin are en route. Roger that. They'd best keep their distance. They could easily be devoured by the workshop. Setting wards around a workshop of that size and treating it to become an otherworld, I can hardly believe it. Oh, the area they turned into another world isn't that large. Faldius casually explained the trick in response to his subordinate's misgivings. I've heard that during the Fourth Holy Grail War in Fuyuki, the previous Lord Elmaloy constructed enough of a labyrinth in his workshop to turn part of the hotel corridor into an otherworld. Oh, I didn't know he did that. That might only be in the novel. Even for a mage of his abilities furnished with 3 magical energy reactors tuned for his use, however, that was the limit. It might be different for Cowback Alcatraz, the renowned Labyrinth Mage of Antiquity. We're going to read about that. That's being translated after book 4 of a prototype, because that's when I was told it goes. I'm paying for that, so look forward to that. But it's just not possible for a mage to transform an entire city block into an otherworld. Valdius shook his head as he matter-of-factly explained the situation, or perhaps he was attempting to isolate himself from the present confusion by talking about what was to him common sense. Baslot only activated the workshop. It's actually the joint creation of the Scratio family's mages. I doubt that even Baslot can leave when it's in full operation. A joint creation, sir. Yes, the product of a number of mages combining their fields of expertise. Other words, it says. I don't know if that's a typo, if that's a thing. Illusions, wards, the installation of demonic beasts. Individually, they can't match the defensive capabilities of the previous Lord Elmaloy's workshop, but Baslot possesses uncommon magical energy. They made a stunt on that scale possible by having him activate other mages' workshops through brute force. It's not just that plant, Valdius continued, watching the writhing meat processing plant on the monitor. Scratio family mages have worked on all the surrounding factories as well. They all function to support the workshop in that meat processing plant. As a result, it would be difficult for even an accomplished mage to escape that workshop when it's in that state. Then the Einsburn homunculus and Miss Borzak are helpless? Not at all. Valdius immediately contradicted his subordinate as if his earlier praise of the workshop had been a lie. It would be one thing if they'd gone in alone. With the heroic spirit Haruri summoned, however, it's a different story. The workshop in Fuyuki I mentioned was destroyed along with the entire hotel, but if a servant well-versed in magecraft had summoned the labyrinth, he would have broken through it sooner or later. Valdius's opinion on the matter was the opposite of what it had been 10 years earlier. A modern, labyrinthized workshop was difficult to penetrate. Even a heroic spirit would need to exploit a weak point or a back door, he thought. Now that he had accessed the data from his puppet his ancestor had left behind, the record of the Third Fuyuki Holy Grail War, and had contact with the heroic spirit Hassani Sabah, however, he was in no doubt. A maze of that level would not work on a powerful heroic spirit. Although I doubt that weak Avenger in the record of the Third Fuyuki War could do anything about it, Valdius thought as he summoned his attention to a monitor. In any case, if she summons her servant to break out of the workshop, it would be a golden opportunity for us to observe its abilities. Without taking his eyes off the monitor and showing a familiar bird's-eye view of the meat processing plant, Valdius contacted his subordinate about one other matter. Cattle calling Thorn. How do things look on your end? No activity. 2 heat sources inside the mansion, apparently humans. Based on magical energy readings, it looks like 2 materialized heroic spirits as well. 2. There should be 3 heroic spirits, including 1 Sigma summoned. Are there any dematerialized? I can't tell. I confirmed a servant who appears to be Saber through a second-floor window. There are strange fluctuations in the magical energy readings, almost like multiple overlapping spirit forms. Valdius was just about to ask his subordinate for a more detailed report when... Fluctuations? What do you mean? Send the exact... What's wrong? Subordinate was suspicious of the way Valdius' words suddenly cut off, but his question never reached Valdius' ears. Valdius' eyes were fixed on the monitor displaying the meat processing plant, where he could see something impossible writhing. Cattle calling Thorn. Leave the minimum number of personnel there and head for the industrial district ASAP. After ending the call with the bare number of instructions, Valdius glared at the monitor. He knew what heroic spirit Haruri had planned to summon. After all, it had been Valdius who went through the state to prepare a catalyst. The thing he saw, however, looked like nothing he had anticipated. To begin with, it looked more like an animal or an insect than a heroic spirit. Its body was also covered in pistons, wires, and cables, and it was large enough to stomp a small prefabricated house flat with ease. Valdius's eyes narrowed his eyes at the thing and muttered to himself, Haruri, what the hell did you summon? Several minutes earlier, the meat processing plant. Master, will these wards hinder my movements? Although his words were calm, Alcides seemed ready to unleash his full power at the slightest provocation. Given that a woman had appeared claiming to be a goddess, one of his sworn enemies, that was to be expected. Bazelot made no move to rebuke or restrain him. He just stood between the woman and Alcades and spoke dispassionately. You have directionality, but it isn't perfect. Still, a little hindrance shouldn't be a problem for you. You have the strength to trample a goddess. Show it to me here. That goes without saying. Alcides began moving toward the upper part of the shifting meat processing plant in order to deliver a blow to the goddess, who continued to deal with the downpour of demonic beasts. Bazelot sprang into action at the same time. He drew a crude pistol from a pocket and began a slow walk toward the female mage who appeared with the woman. Haruri's eyes met those of the approaching owner of the workshop, and she was assailed by a sensation of blood leaving her body. Bazelot had the air of what a chimera born only to kill ends up with. His gaze filled Haruri with fresh conviction that she had come to a place she could never leave. Physically, she could not go back outside. There was no going back in terms of her situation either. She regretted allowing events to carry her to this point. At the same time, however, she considered that, without Philia, she would have lost her life anyway. In that case, what should she have done with the life she had gained? The answer that came to her was, of course, her revenge on Mage Society. As Haruri recalled her past, the fear faded from her eyes and she began to gradually regain her cool. She hated Mage Society. This ability to switch off her emotions spoke to her talent as a mage. Be that as it may, her mind was now filled with the determination to use everything she had been blessed with to fight her way free of that place. Oh, that's right. My plan was always to rage as much as I could in this world and disappear. What am I afraid of? Perhaps Bazelot noticed a shift in Haruri's mentality, as he stopped walking and, keeping his gun trained on her, posed a question. Was it your idea to come here? Philia suggested it. I just followed her. I see. That thing is called Philia. What is it? It seemed that Philia's abnormality worried Bazelot after all. Bazelot, rather. Haruri shook her head, keeping her nerves trained on the muzzle pointed at her. I owe her my life. That's all I know, and right now that's all I need. Well now, Philia laughed as she went on wiping out demonic beasts some distance away. You can say some delightful things despite all the time you spent cowering. Well, it's true that as long as you realize my charm, you don't need to understand me. Out of nowhere, an arrow flew at her blind spot. As before, however, dense magical energy that surrounded her deflected its trajectory, hurling it into the ongoing torrent of demonic beasts. The beasts it struck were blasted to smithereens. Bazelot's servant, presumably Archer, fired more arrows under cover of the spraying blood. Nothing you will do? Philia swallowed her words mid-sentence. Reflected in her eyes were several dozen arrows flying out of the sky that peeked through the open ceiling. Who knew when he had found time to fire them? Based on the fact that their trajectories precisely targeted Philia, however, it seemed unlikely that he had simply shot countless shafts into the air and waited for them to come down. Then, Philia noticed the bronze arrows were transforming as they fell, becoming birds with metal beaks and wings. Are those the Stymphalides. Sure, let's go with that. Familiars of the Western war god. The sight of the arrows transforming one by one into giant birds with bronze-coated beaks, wings, and talons was fantastical. As the birds were rushing at her full of bloodlust, however, Philia had no time to be fascinated. Not bad. Philia spoke as if she was impressed, but she wiped all expression from her face as the innumerable birds attacked. Haruri, however, was distracted by the onslaught. No sooner had she looked away than a bullet fired from Bazelot's pistol aimed squarely at the girl mage's heart. The bullet, however, never reached Haruri. Bazelot's ammunition was crafted to pierce advanced defensive magecraft, but it ricocheted off an invisible wall. A moment later, it materialized in the center of the workshop. Something like static crackled through the space between Bazelot and Haruri. A giant mass of rust-colored iron appeared, forming a wall between the two. Meanwhile, in another part of the workshop, another massive iron scythed through the air above Philia, smashing all the bronze birds born from arrows in a single strike. The static spread to a wider area, and at last an enormous shape fully revealed itself in the workshop. The most abnormal thing about it was its size. The berserker that appeared before Haruri was far larger than it when she first set eyes on it. Oh, interesting. Having achieved truly monstrous proportions. An underground facility. Was this different? Okay. In a room where the sun did not shine, a woman froze in the act of tending to a horse. What's wrong, Polite? Your magical energy went a little wild for a moment there. What is happening? Hearing a woman's voice from the room next door, the woman called Polite answered with some confusion. Just now, I sensed my father's cherished birds, but they soon vanished. Birds? The Stymphalides, monstrous birds that my father, the god of war, was said to have loved, although I hear that he drove them from the peninsula. I see. Maybe he summoned them then? He had your belt, didn't he? Still, if they're vanished, I doubt it would be a good idea to drop everything and rush over. Polite considered briefly. Right, Hippolyte, yeah. Considered briefly, then nodded her assent to the voice's ready answer. I suppose so. Don't worry, master. I won't act on my own again, the woman declared with dignity. Her cheeks reddened slightly as she continued. And, master, calling me Polite is, well, what? Why? You're Hippolyte. Either way, I always went with Hippolyta, but... So, Polite. Or would Hippo be better? Polite is fine. The rider-class servant, Hippolyte... Should we go Hippolyte? Or Hippolyte? Let's go Hippolyte. I prefer that. Heaved an exasperated sigh. Her attitude hinted that she was less annoyed than embarrassed by the nickname. A serious look suddenly entered her eyes as she turned them back to the direction the presence had come from. Hippolyte did not normally excel in sensing presences. She was, however, sensitive to any that resembled the noble phantasm she wore, the war belt she inherited from her father. Hippolyte suggested Alcides was involved in a battle. She refocused and turned her back to the horse, all the while gritting her teeth at the thought of the great hero she would one day have to settle things with, or rather, the Avenger it sunk to. Back to the meat processing plant. Oh, you protected me while you were at it. Good boy. Philia looked up at it, surveying the flock of crushed bronze birds with a faint smile. It was Haruri's servant, which had thus far kept its form and presence hidden. No one, however, was more shocked by its appearance than Haruri herself. What? It's gotten even bigger than before? On the way to the plant, when it had been crawling on buildings, it was roughly the size of an elephant. Now, however, it had completed a transformation into a mechanical spider, gigantic enough to wrap its legs around even the enormous trailers used to transport an elephant to a zoo. Although it did not appear to be making any large movements, the sound of spinning gears and metal scraping against metal still sounded from it, and its eyes blazed with their usual white-hot light. Then, a voice like a record player with a rusty needle, the same voice Haruri had first heard, resounded in Basilot's workshop. Me. Oh, enemy, maybe? Berserker's body shook as it roared, trying to make some appeal. Haruri was perplexed. Come on, Haruri, the grinning Philia called out to her. You're his master, so hurry up and give him an order. What? He's asking who the enemy is. If you leave him alone, I'm pretty sure he'll think all the little children apart from you and me are enemies and demolish the city. Is that all right with you? At that, Haruri hurriedly turned back to Berserker. Designate an enemy. That was what Berserker's blazing eyes were telling her as it continued to stand between her and Basilot, shielding her. Basilot had fired many more bullets, sometimes using magically induced refraction to target Haruri's blind spots, but cables that sprouted from Berserker's body swatted every shot aside, and Berserker was slowly vanishing into thin air. Even the sound of it was disappearing. The pressure it exerted, however, remained in the workshop. This is different from the concealment Philia performed in the city earlier. Even I can't see it. Can this heroic spirit turn invisible under its own power? Haruri gulped. It was coming home to her that it was coming home to her as she made contact with a shocking heroic spirit. Tell this berserker who the enemy was, Philia had said. She felt that she was being tested. Could she kill a person, even an enemy master? Haruri pondered. Like a mage, she stifled her emotions and froze her trembling heart. Would she give the order? The order to kill? Would she, like a mage, free herself from the ethics of reality? Or would she prattle on about justified self-defense, as if to openly declare that she was still human, even though she had thrown herself into the Grail War? After a brief period of indecision, she shouted to the invisible berserker. Berserker! The enemy is this mage's workshop. Please, smash it to bits! The area reverberated with berserker's creaking and its grating cry, as if it was pleased to be ordered. Philia, who had leapt to Haruri's side without her noticing, quietly laid a hand on her shoulder. Hup! Haruri let out a cry of surprise. Philia narrowed her eyes. Well, you dodged that nicely, she said, smiling kindly at Haruri. You didn't outright order him to kill. That's not what I... Oh, don't misunderstand me. I'm not blaming you. Philia grinned broadly as she dispatched the surviving demonic beasts one after another with arrows of magical energy. Then, without her smile faltering, she matter-of-factly declared, I mean, if you were the kind of girl who could give the order to kill that easily, you'd fall into the category of mage, not human. And then... The end of her sentence was blotted out by sounds of destruction. The invisible berserker had begun to rampage. The nearby walls and floors were crushed. It demolished the entrance to a corridor that had been partly transformed into an otherworld by brute force. How are they gonna, no wonder they're taking forever to animate this. How the frick do you animate this? This seems insane, right? Like, you can hear this described? How do you even animate this? Like, it's in my brain, and I hope it's in your brain too. I mean, that's kind of the hope with this series is, you know, my reading evokes that in your brain. I don't know how they'll ever animate this. This is insane. Okay. Now, you leave the rest to Berserker and run. I'll have to be cautious when dealing with that mage with the scary face and the twisted heroic spirit. If I don't kill them carefully, the mud will fly everywhere, Philia said as she leaped again and vanished through a break in the rubble. Haruri broke out in a cold sweat as she watched her. She didn't need to be told to throw herself at the doorway. That throwing herself at the doorway now is... she didn't need to be told to throw herself at the doorway now there was no longer an otherworld. Almost as if she was fleeing Philia, rather than Bazelot or his bow-wielding servant. Amid the roar of destruction, she caught the end of what the smiling Philia had said. I mean, if you're the kind of girl who would give the order to kill that easily, you'd fall into the category of mage and not human, then honestly, there'd be no point keeping you alive. It was no joke. She was certain of that. Haruri was still grateful to Philia for saving her. At the same time, however, she was deeply afraid of her. A question that she pondered many times before reoccurred to her. What in the world have I summoned? So, did she summon, like, Berserker Alter Edison because he is kind of responsible for the decline of Magecraft fully with, like, television and stuff? And so she summoned him because they both want to destroy Magecraft? Is that what we're getting at? I wonder. It can't have dematerialized, Bazelot decided. Probably an optical camouflage ability. Even the sound disappearing must be due to one of the heroic spirit's skills, possibly that self-proclaimed goddess. Bazelot judged that if it had dematerialized inside his workshop, then, servant or not, it would have suffered heavy damage from the wards in Magecraft. He surmised that the thing, he could not tell if it was a heroic spirit or a monster, had been isolating its form, sounds, and magical energy from the beginning. After a brief pause, Bazelot reached a cold-hearted decision and telepathically communicated it to Alcides. The workshop would likely be destroyed. You may go all out. Are you sure? Alcides asked. You'll lose that device as well. Not a problem, Bazelot responded without hesitation. The family is already capable of mass-producing it. Any mana crystals we produce now would just be a drop in the bucket. Don't worry. Our current supply was evacuated the moment the workshop's defense mechanisms activated. I wouldn't be able to show my face to the Scratio family if I lost it all due to my own stinginess. Having dispassionately made up his mind to abandon something, Lancelot performed reinforcement magecraft on his own body and leapt into the flying rubble. Either way, now that we made this much of a scene, Faldius and Orlando will take action. You making a bigger scene won't change anything. So long as our opponent calls herself a goddess, be the truth what it may, I have no intention of taking the secrecy of magecraft into consideration. I don't care. Arrangements are in place to dispose of the entire city if it comes to that. Faldius will activate them if the need arrives, whatever Francesca and the police chief think. It's only a sacrifice of 800,000 people. Lancelot questioned Alcides, his voice still impassive. Even the clock tower would approve it in exchange for magical secrecy. Oh my god, they would. Are you prepared to make it? Naturally. Alcides answered the probing question without hesitation. It's a fair price to pay for the destruction of the gods. Then, Alcides unleashed his power. In order to bring the hammer down on the woman who called herself a goddess and the servant of the mage who seemed to be her underling, it did not matter if they were foreign gods, different from the bitter enemies he knew. Okay, so definitely a foreign god, okay. The Wetland Mansion. Don't stick your head out the window, Ayaka. Snipers are scary, you know. Even I was shot dead by Pierre. I wouldn't stick my head out if you asked me to. Ayaka and Saber were going over the situation while hiding themselves deep in the mansion. When Ayaka heard from Sigma that the mansion was surrounded by a special forces unit, she first assumed that it was SWAT or some other police unit in pursuit. According to Sigma, however, they were pawns of the mages who organized this Holy Grail War. Part of the US government conspiring with mages? Is this some kind of fantasy movie? Don't be like that, Ayaka. People in power and mages are a good combination, you know. In the shadow of the great King of Knights was the Flower Mage, who brought him into the world. I may not have had a court mage myself, but I did have an odd fellow who followed me around. You mean Saint Germain? Ayaka could not help blurting out, in spite of how nervous she had been to bring up that name earlier. You're well informed. Is he famous? Saber looked surprised. Ayaka was just wondering how to explain when Sigma reappeared in the doorway. 70% of the unit was just transferred to another location. The only ones left here are observers. So if you want to move, I think now's the time. Transferred? Ayaka had a hard time keeping step with Sigma's matter-of-fact demeanor. He was a participant in the Grail War and had been in combat with Assassin when they had met the night before, but he did not seem immediately hostile. Saber had begun persuading him to form an alliance and sit at the same round table. As long as it's an anti-war pact. Sigma had surprisingly responded, with the result that they ended up staying together at the mansion. Ayaka heaved a big sigh and wondered how things could end up like this. To begin with, Saber had made a temporary agreement with the green-haired heroic spirit who, while they dealt with mud and sickness, he had seemingly made a deal with Assassin who had also been present as well. Green-haired hero... Oh, right. Okay, that's, Enkidu. I cannot forgive you for your deeds in life, Assassin had said. Still, I am aware that you fought alongside one of the great chiefs. Therefore, I will spare you until you have eliminated that demon. Oh. Did we know that before? I wonder. It seemed that they had avoided a fight to the death for the moment. Before Ayaka had a chance to pick her jaw up off the floor, Assassin had suggested that, if they needed a base, there was a suitable house in the wetlands. Apparently the demon might return to it, so they ended up going together. After that, there was a light in the window, so Assassin went to take a look. A little while later, there was a big bang and a flash from inside the room. Ayaka had still been confused while Saber conducted negotiations. By the time she regained her senses, the situation had changed. Ayaka felt that she was really being dragged around. At the same time, she was torn between being ashamed of her own cowardice and grateful to Saber for protecting her. She had fallen asleep with those thoughts. But then had come the dream, and after all that, they were apparently up against a special forces unit. I can't understand the people who would willingly participate in the Grail War, she thought as she questioned Sigma. Wouldn't selling us out put you in a better position? It was a blunt question, but Sigma answered it. Valdis is the type to eliminate you as soon as he's done with you. If it comes to that, I'd like to have ties to people like you as well. So, we're insurance. But isn't there a chance that you'll cut us loose as soon as you're done with us? I won't deny it. That's why I won't mind if you keep your guard up with me. I don't trust you with my whole heart, so it's fine if you don't trust me with your whole head. Aika sighed at Sigma's frank manner of speaking. She was wondering what she ought to ask him when Saber broke in. You said that 7/10 of the force moved. Has something happened? Apparently a monster is on a rampage in the factory district. A monster? You must tell me more. Oh, this looks bad. Aika hurriedly tried to stop the conversation, but it was too late. I don't know if someone's heroic spirit or a creature summoned by a heroic spirit. If it's someone, yeah. But according to a communication I intercepted, a monster about the size of this house is destroying the factory district. Once she was sure Saber had finished... Sigma... Oh, it's gonna be rough. Once she was sure Sigma had finished speaking, Aika turned slowly to look at Saber. She saw a grown man whose eyes were shining like a little boy's. Saber. Yes, what is it, Aika? Do you want to go? Aika asked bluntly. What are you saying, Aika? Saber answered, avoiding her eyes. I do not want to go reenact the slaying of the demon cat, shield in hand. Okay, so this is the second time we talked about the demon cat of Britain. People thought it was, Cathpelig, Fu, but I don't think so. And there was also Chapuru before, which might be, but I don't think so. Okay, what if I just look up Demon Cat of Britain? Demon Cat of Britain. Is there something about that? Oh, the Ketchi? Oh wait, I type it in and it comes up with Cathpelig. Wait, it comes up with two things. Ketchi, or Kate Sith if you want to be wrong, and Cathpelig. Wait, it is a proper Arthurian legend. Oh, yeah, okay, well, here we go. Oh, well, this explains everything. Cathpelig was a monstrous cat in Welsh mythology, given birth to in Gwynedd by the pig Henwell of Cornwall. Cat was to haunt the Isle of Anglesey until Kay went to the island to hunt it down. Outside of Wales, the cat's opponent has been transported to King Arthur himself, or occasionally other heroes such as Ogier the Dane. Cathpelig's name in French literature is Chapulu. So Chapulu is the French name for Cathpelig. Interesting. I wonder if this is actually like Fu, or if it was the original monster that then like Fu the beast was named after. I'm not sure. Either way, I'm a bit sad because I did like the FGO thing that basically suggested that the killer rabbit was canon and was Fu, but we'll see. Anyways, I do want to go reenact the slaying of the demon cat, shield in hand. In fact, I'd absolutely love to, but I can't go dragging you into danger now, can I? You took me to a forest with other servants without warning yesterday. I suppose I did. But still, it is a monster. They may have only known each other for a few days. There were a few things that Ayaka understood about Saber. He was basically a giant cat, acting on spinal reflex with unbelievable energy. He would happily pounce on a tuft of green foxtail swaying in the breeze dozens of kilometers away if it caught his interest. But for all that, he was kind. And so he ended up torn between his own desires and his concern for Ayaka. Getting dragged around is a pain, Ayaka thought, but being a burden is even worse. Just as she was about to say something to Saber, she saw it in the corner of her eye. Cold sweat broke out on her face. Her breathing became spontaneously ragged. Why? There's no elevator here. Girl wearing a red hood, lingering on the bed. She slowly turned her face toward Ayaka, but the hood concealed her eyes and expression. The girl's mouth moved slowly. Ayaka had a feeling it was about to break into a grin. Ayaka was ready to scream in terror. What's wrong, Ayaka? At that point, Saber called out to her. She had regained the reason she had been about to lose. The girl in the red hood, There's a typo. The red hood vanished from the bed, leaving only Saber and Sigma staring at Aika's face in confusion. No, it's nothing. So, what are we going to do? Go take a look? Aika turned serious and made the suggestion herself. Before Saber could answer, however, Sigma interrupted. This is just advice, but it'd be better if you didn't. Why? Sigma prefaced his response with, I received another communication earlier, before adding a supplement concerning the current situation. It sounds like my real employer is up to something. Your employer, isn't that a U.S. Special Forces group? I'm not contractually obligated to maintain confidentiality, but it's still my duty. So I can't give you the details, but at the very least, it definitely won't be anything good. You better stay away from there for a while if you don't want to be caught up in it. At that point, Sigma fell silent for a moment. Aika could not be sure if what he said next was meant as a joke or not. Of course, it's probably too late for both of us the moment we got near the city during all this. Somewhere dark. Almost no outside light penetrated Francesca's workshop. Monitors were the only sources of illumination. The workshop's owner, Francesca, was scattering pastries and bags of sweets across the disheveled bed as she squared off against her servant, the boy Prelati. Okay, because I need to think who's speaking first. If that's how it is, I have to give you an order as your master, you know? Speaking of which, don't you think giving yourself an order is an awfully perverse pleasure? How's it feel being on the receiving end? It's unspeakable. A mix of envy and masochism, like I might have a gestalt collapse in the midst of intoxication. Care to trade places tomorrow? It sounds lovely, but I can't. I mean, you go and start a game like stealing my command seals and making me kill myself instead the moment we swished, wouldn't you? You got that right. I'd expect nothing less of me. You're a tricky one. The boy Prelati cackled, slumping against the wall. So, he continued, what's your order? I can guess pretty well, of course. And you guess right. I want my servant Prelati to go work out in a peaceful solution to that war of the monsters in the factory district by force. Wow, doesn't that sound like fun? A normal servant wouldn't want to do anything to do with this, even if you did use a command seal. But you'll go, won't you? Francesca smiled impishly at her male self. The boy Prelati responded with an impish grin of his own and nodded. Francesca rapped the floor with the point of her umbrella, as if to say a contract had been sealed. The wall that the boy Prelati was leaning against drew back with a mechanical click. The wall then slid aside like the door of a train, breaking the workshop's isolation from the outside world. Light flooded into the room, accompanied by a transparent indigo color. Francesca beheld the white radiance of the sun in deep sky blue harmony. That is to say, an infinite expanse of the firmament, a firmament more vibrant than the sky seen from above ground. The boy Prelati, meanwhile, tumbled out as he had been leaning. A different view met his eyes. Endless red earth spread out below him. The city looked like a mold of salt spilled on the barren plain. If it had been night, the city lights would have looked like a starry sky that was partial to one location. Prelati faintly regretted that he did not have the chance to see that as he spread his arms without hesitation and began his free fall while executing a series of dance-like steps. Oh, frick! This is interesting. I didn't know about this. The lowest layer of the stratosphere, 20 kilometers up. That was where Francesca's workshop was. Shut up. It was a giant airship, 200 meters from end to end. Francesca had taken a high-altitude, unmanned airship that the U.S. military was in the process of testing. She has a shield helicarrier. Shut up. Okay. The U.S. military was in the process of testing, applied many layers of wards to it, invisibility, wind diversion, etc. She had piled on modification, mystically, scientifically, and as a matter of taste. That said, it was hardly a mobile fortress, bristling with weapons straight out of a sci-fi novel. It was simply a 200-meter balloon used to lift the meager area of Prelati's workshop. It was an extreme height from which Francesca could look down on everything, but she could hardly grasp events on the surface with naked eyes. With Prelati's enhanced sight, however, it was possible to confirm something on the scale of the disturbance in the factory district. He saw a gargantuan mechanical spider on a rampage, and a bowman turned Avenger, challenging it alone. The factories around them were destroyed. There was no longer any trace of the meat processing plant. He could see the scraps of the other world and ward-inducing static, as well as demonic beasts that spilled out of the workshop. A scene of chaos had begun to unfold. Prelati laughed with simple, unadulterated joy at the sight. One splendid, wonderful, it's wonderful, Francesca. Even while he laughed, the ground was perceptibly closing in on him. The boy continued to digest his clear view of the chaos in the factory district as he shifted his thoughts to the next stage. I'd love to see that scenery spread through the whole city, but not yet. Not yet. Gotta hold on a little longer. He strove to keep a cool head, although the overflowing smile never left his face. But then he was only making a pretense of restraint in order to experience longer, greater pleasure. I've still got to control myself, if only to keep up appearances. That friend of Master's, Valdius, could easily put an end to this whole city. The boy Prelati, high on the speed of freefall, settled on a target. That done, he spread his arms as he continued his headfirst descent. Then, in the midst of the endless expanse of sky, he chanted, recited, sang. He sang the praises of his noble phantasm, and chanted verses expressing the joy of deploying it. I make an offering. To this broken world I offer blessings and thanks and sacrifices. I offer to my mother Ate, born the embodiment of madness. I offer blessings to the holy spirits of the world, who taught me magecraft, the madness of men. O saint and knight, who showed me a different madness, neither of you were mistaken. I make an offering. To all humanity, permitted by this broken world, I offer the sacrifice that is me. As Prelati shouted his self-centered invocation, space around him began to distort. As he hurtled toward the surface, he bellowed the name of the great magecraft that was his noble phantasm at the ground. Grand Illusion! Oh, that's a scary name. What's this gonna mean? The surface. The factory district. There she is, it's that woman! Black-suited Scratio family mages closed in on Haruru with blood-curdling expressions. Berserker was prioritizing the destruction of the workshop, and Filia was with him, so she would have to protect herself. The meat processing plant was no longer recognizable. It seemed, however, that the surrounding factories were also mages' workshops of some kind. Berserker recognized them as enemies and was busy dedicating itself to their destruction. By the time Haruri saw Berserker spit out fire and turn the grounds of one factory into a sea of flame, she had already given up thinking about his actions. Anyway, right now, I've got to focus on making it through this. Everybody, please! At Haruri's shout, a number of bees that had been concealed in her clothing showed themselves. Oh my god, she's the pain. Shut up. Stop those people! I can't believe this. She begged the countless bees hovering around her collar. The bees took off in perfect order and made contact with the men behind her. What the bees? It's no use struggling, swat the... Ugh. Well, a few bees flew straight in as a decoy. The remainder made a high-speed flight and looped back around the men. The men, stung on the backs of their necks, hurriedly tried to fight back with magecraft. An instant later, however, one after the other of them fainted and fell to the ground. Oh my god, she has bee magecraft, shut up. Glancing back over her shoulder, she saw demonic beasts that had gone out of control with the destruction of the workshop skirmishing with the Scratio family's black suits, while Berserker mowed down 2 smokestacks rising from a factory at once. She could see a bowman racing up the toppling smokestacks, leaping high in the air and firing arrows that resembled laser beams. The arrows scored a direct hit on Berserker's back. Berserker's creaking scream resounded through the district. Bowman continued his barrage. This time, however, Berserker used the cables and wires that shrouded his body like tentacles to swat them out of the air. She could also see Filia weaving through the gaps with her counterattacks. Bowman scattered them with a sweep of his bow. It seemed like the tide of battle was seesawing back and forth. It was not a battle she could keep up with, Haruri thought as she sent Berserker a mental cheer. My magical energy isn't much, but I don't mind if you suck it dry, so wreck it. Wreck it all. Everything mages have built. Every last thing. Berserker uprooted power cables from the ravaged ground and began incorporating them into his oh my god. What? began incorporating them into its body as a power source to supplement its magical energy. Strangely, as it did so, its body began to grow even more gigantic. Shut up, how would they ever animate this? Oh my god. Absorbing the rubble of the surrounding factories. I don't care who or what you are anymore. Please, smash this whole world of mages into... At that point, a bullet grazed Haruri's shoulder and gouged out a chunk of flesh. She let out a silent scream and collapsed on the spot. The defensive barrier that covered her body had been momentarily destroyed. The bullet had reached her unprotected shoulder. Its force had been dampened, but it was still enough to tear out a chunk of Haruri's shoulder, send her tumbling into the ground. Haruri Borzak, the man who fired that shot, Bastelot Corleone, asked without the least change in his expression, "What the hell did you summon? You think I'd reveal information about my servant that easily? It'd be easy to kill you outright. Then it'd be impossible to know what monstrosity will do when it goes out of control. If you give me its data, or order it to make suicide with a command seal, I'll put you out of your misery without any necessary pain. Not, I'll leave you with your life then." Haruri struggled to her feet, clutching her shoulder. Bastelot looked faintly puzzled. "You don't look like a mage foolish enough to believe nonsense like that." A mage. Haruri had mixed feelings about someone as half-baked as she was being treated that way as she silently steeled herself. "I'll order it with everything I've got. Make it look like I'm making it kill itself. Completely destroy every mage's workshop in the city. Then move on to Las Vegas or Los Angeles. Keep going as long as your power holds out. After that, the protectors of the land can do whatever they want. Their mystery may be lost too, but I can't say sorry for that." "All right. By my command seal, I order Berserker," Haruri began, slowly raising her hands, when she all too suddenly was dropped into a bottomless hell. Only Bastelot, standing a few meters in front of her with his gun at the ready, remained unchanged. The sky abruptly rushed away upward. In other words, Bastelot was falling alongside her. Go back a few seconds. Philia was the first to notice the abnormality. This magical energy, a descendant of those Mycenian freeloaders? The instant she muttered those words, she saw it. The Mycenian. Where's that? Where's that? Bronze Age Greece? Okay. Greek. We're talking Greek stuff, right? Okay. Greek period history from 1600 BC to 1100 BC. Okay. The instant she muttered those words, she saw it. The ground under her feet vanished without warning and she began to fall. "Hey!" She hurriedly attempted to flee, then realized that magical energy filling the space around her had vanished. "This is... You didn't fool me. You fooled the world's texture. Unbelievable." A look around her told her that the ground under her feet was not all that vanished. A perfect circle of land, centered on the meat processing plant and encompassing most of the factory district, was gone. A blackness with no visible bottom gaped in its place. On top of that, all the magical energy in the area had disappeared without a trace. The Scratio family mages, Philia, Alcides, and even the giant berserker were falling alike. As they resigned themselves to freefall, Philia glared at the source of the phenomenon. The boy who had plummeted to earth with death-defying speed flashed the homunculus who was glaring at them an innocent smile. It seemed that some contrivance allowed him and him alone to use magical energy. He adjusted his speed to match Philia, Haruri, Bastelot, and Alcides, who had just only begun falling, standing shoulder to shoulder with them as they were all swallowed by the bottomless pit. "Hey there. I see a lot of new faces. Has it already been a day since I met the archer there on a snowing mountain?" The androgynous boy's voice rang out light and easy as he fell head first. He spread his arms wide and addressed all those that were falling along with him. "The Oriental Avicii Hell. I've never heard of that. It's supposed to be falling for 2,000 years. Still, I suppose it's kind in that, after 2,000 years, you do reach the bottom. Of course, knowing that you are going to suffer for quintillions more years once you do, it might be better to keep falling. Which do you prefer?" Around the hole, Oh my god, does he have the power of different, like, hells and afterlives? Around the hole, where there had been nothing but jet black walls of earth, various glowing objects popped into being, and vanished just as suddenly in time with his speech. Oni at a banquet, a parade in an abandoned amusement park, children dying of hunger and thirst, an infinite expanse of starry sky, monsters too repulsive to describe, a city so beautiful can only be described as a land of gold, the figure of a holy woman racing across a wasteland, corpses of knights stretching to the ends of the earth. Every one of them felt real. It was almost enough to destroy the lesser Scratio mage's sense of self. More than half of them completely lost their grips on consciousness on the spot. Despite being prevented from using magecraft, however, Basilot Corleone maintained his usual vicious non-expression. Even so, he had his hands full controlling the mud inside him, because what looked like black tattoos peeking out under his cuffs seemed to ride fiercely on his skin. "What's your game, Castor?" Basilot was impassive. The boy he called Castor, who was still upside down, made a respectful bow before replying. "All to ensure the Holy Grail War proceeds without incident. At this rate, Faldius will burn a hole in his stomach, the world will be full of sorrow, flowers will bloom, birds will sing, and as soon as the butterfly at the end of the earth dances and starts a typhoon, Faldius's business making barrels to put bodies in will turn a profit." The latter half of his speech was probably meaningless. Basilot ignored it and continued to glare. "Oh, tough crowd," Castor cackled. Then he gave his answer. "Don't worry, I'm a friend. I'm your friend. A friend to humanity, a friend to the gods, a friend to demonic beasts, and a friend to mages. So that none of them are lost, I've come to postpone the festivities." Castor clapped his hands. The sides of the hole vanished, I think would be hole H-O-L-E, you mean? Revealing thousands, oh my god, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people falling. "I don't know about you, but I don't want to kill the 800,000 people of Snowfield just yet." At that point, the boy vanished, only to reappear as a giant, seemingly kilometers tall. While still falling down the pit, which appeared to be bottomless, he stated his wish. "So, how about we make a deal for the present? A deal with little old me, who the foul-mouthed peasants used to call a demon." What the frick? This is insane. Colesman Special Corrections Center. "So you've done it, Francesca." Faldius watched the scene on the monitor with an uncharacteristic frown. The abnormality had occurred immediately after he received a message from Francesca saying, "Don't worry, I'll work it out somehow or another before long." The instant Faldius confirmed it, he decided that this was an evil day, expressing his situation in parlance of Omniodo, which lay outside his area of expertise. The monitor showed a jet black hole almost completely erasing the factory district. It was well outside the realm of what he could pass off as land subsidence. Even if he took emergency measures to erase the entire city of Snowfield, that hole alone would certainly remain for all of America to see. In addition, a surveillance satellite would pass high above the city in more than a few minutes. It was a civilian satellite supplying data to civilian researchers in close to real time. The day it showed a hole of this size this clearly, the concealment of mystery would be the least of his worries. He was just about to phone Francesca in order to inquire how she intended to take responsibility when another abnormality began on the monitor. No sooner was the colossal hole filled in than, almost like time was rewinding, the toppled smokestacks and crumbled walls of factories began to reform. Even the burnt grass in the empty lofts regained its verdant life. What is this? Transmission from Francesca reached the bewildered Faldius. "Yoo-hoo, are you surprised? I bet I softened that grumpy look of yours a little. Well?" "This is no laughing matter. What exactly did you do?" "Oh, just an illusion," Francesca roared with laughter as she answered Faldius' question. "Of course, it's my noble phantasm as a heroic spirit, so it can do things an order of magnitudes more stunning than turning a wasteland into a snowy mountain. Oh, I almost forgot. I can't say why, but the people who are brawling down there seem to have reached a peaceful settlement. Mysterious, isn't it? Maybe it's the power of love. Isn't it lovely? Love, I mean." Faldius ignored the better part of her words and correctly deduced that she had struck some sort of deal. Before he could press her about it, however, Francesca gave him a reminder by way of warning. Don't forget, until it's all over, we're enemies in the Holy Grail War too. Then, almost incidentally, she said something about the restored factories that Faldius found difficult to believe. They may look like they're back to normal, but it's still an illusion, you know. You can touch them, live in them, even go and use them as factories and workshops, but that's all they are. In about 5 days, the world will realize it's been fooled and they'll just crumble away like they were, so take care of the cover-up before then. With that parting wholesale delegation of responsibility, Francesca ended the call. Faldius turned his eyes skyward, glaring at the airship he should not be able to see through the ceiling. If there is a next time, Francesca, I'll eliminate you before it starts. We have a strange report, sir. Faldius decided that in any case, he would have to start working on a cover-up operation. He was considering putting it down to mismanagement, suggesting that the same gas company implicated in the desert explosion. The report Alundra handed him was insufficient to draw his interest. We have a report that Clan Calatin members are en route. We must use repelling words to induce an evacuation. The report read, civilians living in the near the factory district have simultaneously began a mass evacuation of the city center and suburbs. As far as Faldius could see, it was, in fact, only natural that people who heard the explosions and sound of destructions would evacuate on their own accord. That was why he was unable to notice the abnormality at once. To notice that, while the disturbance in the factory district had been quelled, something more dangerous had awoken in its place. In a dream. I wonder if the people over by the factories are all right. I'm sure they are. See? Look over there. The boy pointed. They all came from over there. They evacuated to the city. Tsubaki, seeing a large crowd of townspeople headed their way, heaved a sigh of relief. A little earlier, a sound like thunder had come from the direction of the factories. Tsubaki's new friend Jester said that they were burning. Oh, if there's a fire, there must be people. I wonder if they're okay. I hope they all managed to evacuate. Seeing Jester worry made Tsubaki uneasy. That had made her talk to Mr. Black. I hope the people around the factories are able to get away in time. All the while unaware that, behind her, the boy called himself Jester was wearing a wicked grin. Thus, the 120,000 people, that's a lot, who lived in the area around the factory district, contacted an unknown illness. While this bloodsucker in a boy's skin grasped the truth, the city began to roll gently, but inexorably, towards tragedy. And even he was unaware that, in only half a day, people who attempt to stop it would appear. Frickin', this is so good. I have no idea how they're gonna, I legitimately have no clue how some of this is going to be animated. And again, as I say, one of the reasons I like reading these, the movie in my head is better than what I'll see in actual video, I bet. We're not too far apparently they're airing the next episode, which people are making the joke, and this is the first yearly anime. I can kind of understand why it's taking a while. How the frick do you have this? Anyways, guys, thank you all for watching. We'll see you next time as we move on to the next chapter here. Interlude, backstage of the third-rate comedy. This will probably be, if my timing goes up here, we're on page 89 of 162. Maybe we'll do 4 videos? I don't know. We'll have to see. Thank you all for watching, though, guys. We'll see you next time for some more. Ciao.
Yo.